Capitol Hill might get a little quieter after tomorrow as the lower chamber is breaking early for the August recess due to the continuing clamor for access to the Jeffrey Epstein files from Republican Congressman Thomas Massie and a cadre of Democrats. But rest assured, there will still be news, even if Congress is at a standstill. Joining me now to discuss some of this news is Washington Stand's editorial director and senior writer, Suzanne Bowdey, as well as the managing editor for the broadcast, Casey Harper. Suzanne, Casey, welcome to Washington Watch.
Thanks, Tony.
All right, Suzanne, let me start with you. New Hampshire's so-called Republican governor, Kelly Ayotte, who used to be in Congress, used to be a senator, recently showed her true colors regarding her trans extremism, which is really odd, given that this is a Democrat issue that they're drowning in politically, and here you have a Republican grabbing hold of it. Tell us what she did.
It's inexplicable, really, because let me just set the scene for you in New Hampshire right now. They have a trifecta in the state house, in the state legislature, and the governor's mansion. They actually won more seats for the Republican Party last election. And so what Kelly Ayotte's done is really shocking to me, especially because the Granite State voters are really behind this agenda to stop transing our kids, essentially. And what was before her were a few really surprising bills. She signed 103 bills before the session ended, but she vetoed 7, and many of those were social conservative issues. For example, one of the bills that she vetoed would have kept biological men out of girls' spaces. We're talking about prisons, we're talking about locker rooms, we're talking about bathrooms. This is an issue that had 69% support, which frankly is low, I believe, in a lot of states. Some states it's upward of 70 and 80.
But it is New Hampshire.
But it is New Hampshire, right. She vetoed that. She also vetoed a forum for parents to be able to complain about sexually explicit materials in the kids' classrooms. So this would have created an avenue for each school to open investigations if parents had a legitimate complaint about something pornographic or, LGBT, etc. She said, no, these are overly broad bills. She also rejected a bill that would have let parents opt in to a very controversial government survey. I'm sure you've talked about it on the show before, the Youth Risk Behavioral Survey, which asked very invasive questions, leading questions about kids and their behavior. She said, no, we don't want parents to opt in. We want to give as many answers as possible to this survey. It is baffling to me why, when Republicans are truly dominating on this issue, I mean, Democrats are flailing, that she would lean into this, especially
so why is she doing it?
I honestly don't know.
Now, her record in Congress was not that good.
Right. I will say, as a senator, she was not our friend on things like women in the draft, the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, which was very LGBT forward. She really, except for on a few life issues, was not our friend. But I don't know why, particularly in New Hampshire, where this is like Congress for a governor. She runs every 2 years, and as we've learned from people like Terry McAuliffe, parents do not take kindly to their values and rights being trampled.
Could this just be her ideological bent? I mean, maybe she's just. Is she bought into this agenda?
It could be, and it could be that voters are going to find that out and vote her out.
What's interesting, at the same time, the New York Times writing a piece recently about how the Democrats they're at a loss as to how to get out of this. This transgender agenda has them boxed in, and they're underwater politically.
Right.
Well, they've painted themselves into a corner. It's an 80-20 issue. Maybe in New Hampshire it's 69. Right. And the reason they can't get out of it is they framed the entire argument in moral terms. And so they've said those who oppose transgenderism are evil, they're hateful, they're not loving. And so they can't back down because they'll be hateful.
So actually what that does then is it further enrages those who have concerns about this agenda, because not only are they telling them, you don't have a right to protect your kids, but you're a bigot because you want to protect your kids.
But what's also crazy is at the same time that she's vetoing these bills, a Democratic governor in North Carolina, who is no social conservative, actually signed into law a Parents Protection Act. So now she looks even more radical than a Democratic governor.
Well, maybe he can read
state.
the polls a little better than she can.
Right, absolutely.
Not that that's how we should be making our decisions.
No, but when the truth and the polls align, we should pay attention.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how people are just kind of out of step with reality. We saw the CEO of NPR, Catherine Marr, who This is comical. First, it was Big Bird that was going to be on the grill. Now it's public safety as a result of the Congress cutting funds to public broadcasting.
Yeah, the public safety argument is they've lost every other argument, and so they're pulling this one out at the last minute. I mean, we've covered at the Washington Stand at length the kind of ridiculous bias at PBS and NPR. It was just a propaganda shop. Even a former longtime editor at NPR, he surveyed the newsroom, and he found that there was 87 registered Democrats and 0 Republicans. We're not even talking 80-20 split here. It's by and large entirely
That's probably
Democrat.
Typical of most newsrooms.
Right, but they don't get federal money.
I know. Right. So it's just like, why do we want to subsidize another leftist media outlet when we can do that for free?
Well, public safety, Tony.
Yeah, well, so let's talk about that public
We have a
safety.
clip.
Let's talk. Okay, we got a clip. Let's play that clip.
Many of the stations receive up to 70% of their funding through federal dollars across the country, often tribal areas, rural areas. 50%. These are areas that are exposed to extreme weather patterns like tornadoes, for example, in Florida along the hurricane coast. Often at risk. We have seen estimates that as many as 80 stations could go dark, and almost all of these are stations that exist in these areas that otherwise have limited resources and limited access.
All right, 50 years ago, all right, maybe so.
Right.
But in the age of cable, the age of satellite, the age of the internet, and this, by the way, was the rationale that Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, Susan Collins gave for voting against the rescissions bill in the Senate last week.
Right, but there's two reasons this doesn't really hold up. The first is internet access is ubiquitous, regardless of even poverty level. I was at Starbucks this weekend.
We're underwriting it. The federal government is underwriting it.
I was at Starbucks this weekend, and I walked in. It didn't bother me, but there's 2 homeless people charging their smartphones and watching YouTube videos. And I just had this moment of, hey, there's no limit to access to smartphones and the internet. And then the second thing is we have AM radio. I mean, FM can go 20 to 40 miles, but AM, in some cases, can go thousands of miles.
All right, let's talk about that for just a moment, all right? Because there is a bill in Congress to deal with AM radios. Now, that's not the point of our conversation here, but if Congress really was concerned about access in cases of emergency, the AM radio system has long been that vehicle by which, when power goes out, you got the little transistor radio. I mean, I can tell you, with hurricanes, we've used it a lot. The manufacturers of cars are taking the AM radios out. And so there is a Save the AM radio bill in Congress, which we support, which would cost the federal government zero.
Right, and it doesn't have the media bias baggage that NPR and PBS and all those others. Right.
People can just tune into whatever station they want to listen to during a time of national emergency or local crisis. I mean, this is where, when you see stuff like this, like Catherine Marr, it's a spin, and it is not truthful in what we're hearing.
Yeah, well, they always go to every argument for them goes down to you hate people, you want to hurt them. The trans argument, you hate trans kids and you want them to die. If you goes down, you want to cut back on some of the things we've reported on, like drag queens reading children's books to kids on PBS, or NPR segments about queer ducks. I know you can check that one out right after we get off the air, Tony.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, there's a lot to
If
learn
it walks
there.
like a duck,
Exactly. So, they're pushing these things out,
not quite
but then when it gets attacked, they say, oh, they have to find out human safety. If you want to trim, $1 out of Medicaid, you want to kill poor people. If you want to trim $1 out of Medicare, you want to. It's always the same argument.
But here's what's happening, and members said this on the program, that in particular the rescissions bill in the Senate over PEPFAR, which is something that I'm pretty passionate about because it's such a waste of money, that even though they knew that trimming $400 million out of $7.1 billion was not going to affect the delivery of health and safety and life-saving medicines, they didn't want to face the political threats of Democrats. So it was by fear. That's why we have $37 trillion in debt. They're afraid to take a principled, truthful stand out of fear of politics.
Well, the 2 biggest tools of the enemy, fear and accusation.
Yeah.
And it's all accusation on this issue, and that's why it's so powerful.
I want to go back. We just have about 5 minutes left, Suzanne. I want to go back to the issue that Kelly Ayotte was running from. Congress is actually dealing with some of these issues, trying to address, we talked earlier with Congressman Greg Steube, to really allow those who have been taken advantage of, lied to over this gender craze to sue. So there's a lot happening on that front. There seems to be like this massive dose of common sense all of a sudden hit America.
And we have to applaud Republicans, Donald Trump, Speaker Mike Johnson, for really putting a spotlight on these issues because, as you pointed out, the Stubbe bill, the one that you're referring to, the Restoring Biological Truth in the Workplace, it shouldn't be necessary. We have the Constitution. We have the First Amendment. We have the Civil Rights Act. But here, they're taking an extra step to say, look, if you're in the workplace, people like Pastor Luke Ashe, you shouldn't be punished for acknowledging that there are two genders. And that's a biological reality and a moral and scriptural one as well.
And not be forced to have to play along with this make-believe. And that's what they want. It's not that you just allow it to go on. They want you to participate in it. You have to be a part of their charade, and that is fundamentally wrong. And by the way, folks, let me, I know hundreds of you have already signed that petition. I'll put it back up there for you again. Text the word pastor to 67742. This is regarding Luke Ashe, the East Baton Rouge Parish Library, back at my home city of Baton Rouge. Actually, I live in Pride, but I don't like to tell people I live in Pride because I feel like I have to repent. But it's a community north of Baton Rouge. But text the word pastor to 67742, and you can sign this petition that will be delivered to the executive director of the library. Pastor Luke was fired for refusing. He didn't say anything to anyone. He just would not agree to use biologically incorrect pronouns. And so he didn't line up with their DEI policy, and so he was fired. It is amazing how, again, text the word pastor to 67742. Diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Or else.
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't work for anyone who doesn't agree with him. There's no inclusion, there's no diversity, there's no equity for those who don't agree with him.
And those who agree with them are the majority of the population. I mean, the people that are being retaliated against are the ones who share the majority view.
The encouraging thing is that, 4 years ago, the trend was moving in the other direction.
Very much so.
But there were a few, FRC taking policy positions. Then you had some courageous young women standing up that said, you know what, we're just not going to play along with this game. It took a little while, but all of a sudden it was like, yeah, the emperor doesn't have any clothes. People began to admit that, this is nonsense. It's insanity. We can't play along with it. But as I was even talking about yesterday on the program with Pastor Lewis, we got to connect this back to where it all started.
Right.
Redefinition of marriage, redefinition of human sexuality.
And he took it back even farther to the 50th
It does go back, and
yeah.
it goes back to, and that's why I did the covenant marriage law back when I was in the legislature. It does go back to how we treat the institution of marriage, because once we departed from God's truth, this is where we end up.
Yeah, when you untether from the truth, I mean, you can drift anywhere. Wherever the river or the wind's going to take you, that's where you end up. So you can't. That's why I'm not really surprised when the next ridiculous thing comes out from someone on the left, because when you've untethered, you'll go anywhere.
Well, it's just like, President Obama began this, Biden continued it. You should be able to marry the one you love. Yeah. And then you have people, furries and all these other things. I mean, it's just, there's no end. Yeah. There's no end to the nature of fallen man.
Yeah.
And that's why we need a Redeemer. And that's why Jesus came, so that we can be restored and sanctified into what God wanted us to be free and to be able to have life and have it more abundantly. Yeah. But you can't do it chasing a lie. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. And we have an obligation as Christians to lovingly but boldly and courageously proclaim that truth.
And to stand with those who are. I mean, what's so encouraging about Luke's story is how many people have come around him and alongside him and said, we will fight with you. And I think that's something as Christians we need to continue to do, is to bolster those who are taking stands that are affecting their lives and their livelihoods in this case.
Well, courage breeds courage.
Right.
And we just need more people that know the truth and are willing to stand for the truth. That's why when Joshua took over and the Lord said, be strong and courageous, and that wasn't courage and strength needed to face the enemy. It was to obey the word of God.
Yeah.
And that's where we need our courage. Suzanne, Casey, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Tony.
All right.